Okay, let's do this. Ready? Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michael Markowsky. Welcome to my studio. Today we are going to recreate another painting by another one of my all-time very favorite artists. Today we're going to be looking at the art of Wassily Kandinsky. And Kandinsky is one of the most important, most significant, most influential artists of the last 100 years. Hands down, no debate. I mean, we could debate whether his influence was positive or negative, because Wassily Kandinsky, along with Hilma af Klint, who we looked at about a year and a half ago, Wassily Kandinsky and Klint were the two artists really primarily responsible for introducing abstraction into Western art. So an image like this that doesn't look like a person or a cat or a building, a landscape, this type of thing that we're seeing on the screen right now was at one point extremely revolutionary, the cause of riots, of angry letters to the editor. Some people still write angry letters to the editor, but probably not about paintings like this and whether it's so-called art or not. So I'm super excited. We're going to start at the very, very beginning. If you have zero experience ever painting, if you are a young person, you're an old person, and you're interested in painting, today is the class where we're going to begin. We're going to start very gently. And those people who've been painting for a while, this painting is one of them, and Wassily Kandinsky's one his most famous paintings. So even those of you that think, oh, I know how to do all this, I think there's still a lot of value in trying to paint today's painting. Okay, so this is the painting we're about to make. I'll just let you know, here's the sort of the plan of attack today. Now it looks like there's a lot of stuff on this list. This is typically what we do in every single episode. I don't think we're going to get to every single little detail here because today's painting is fairly straightforward, fairly simple. But I just thought this is generally the steps required to complete any of the paintings. I thought I'd also let you know that, just remind everyone to like and subscribe to the channel. And if you find today's episode interesting, helpful, there are many different ways to support the channel, including using the super chat function here in YouTube. You can donate directly through YouTube. Okay, so let's begin here. I want to show you guys how to do this image transfer. And now I just realized that I might have accidentally closed this video. Let's see. No, I didn't want to do that. Absolutely not want to do that. Okay, I want to... There's always something when you're using all these different programs and software. I want to let you know that there is a free outline for today's episode. You can go to, there's a Dropbox link in the description below, and if you go into that Dropbox link, you're going to see a whole bunch of files. Like, oh, there should be, oops, this is the wrong file too, so here we are, because there's lots of files within this folder. We can see, we scroll all the way down. These are all paintings that we've done. So if you're interested in painting, this is the first time you've painted with me, then there's lots of stuff to keep you busy. But we're going to start right at the top, right? Here's our intro episodes where we talked about very basic aspects of painting. And we click in here, Wassily Kandinsky, you're going to see 3 images in here. Those 3 images correspond, we have the original, and then we have this outline. So you can download that, and then you can print it off. If you don't have a printer, I'm going to do a real quick sketch of this. Here's all of the outlines that I've already done for the next couple of months worth of painting. So I just thought, I've finally done it. I know I've been telling people, usually I do the outlines before we get started so we can just skip over this. I've actually done it, so you can print this outline out on just a regular inkjet, laserjet printer that you have at home or at work, and then we can transfer this onto this canvas. So I'm going to show you how I do that here. Oops. So here, I'm just going to play this and talk over top of it. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tape this down. Oh, I'm going to start it all over again. Set it up, and I'm going to take it all down again. Oh my goodness. I got to make sure it's absolutely perfect for us to begin here. Okay, there we go. That was a better version, right? Okay. You can see I'm going to be painting on a regular 9x12 sized canvas board. And then here's the outline printed out on my inkjet printer at home, and here's just some regular tape. You can use any tape, but probably painter's tape, blue or green painter's tape. Even if it's from the dollar store is recommended, just because it's formulated so that it's not going to peel paint off or stick too much. And then I'm using some carbon paper. You can use graphite paper. Some of it's two-sided, some of it's one-sided. Just make sure you put the shiny side down. And you can see I've used this same piece many, many times. Okay, I'm going to go over this. And I'm not going to play this whole thing because it's pretty self-explanatory. And you can see I didn't do the absolute best job of this, right? There's some of these little lines and circles that I missed. The point is just sort of getting, 12 of these little circles down, and then we can get the painting begun. But, if you find that a little bit tricky, then you can use the outline to help you. And there is ways to transfer this image without carbon paper or graphite paper if you don't have it. So, and I talked about that in our previous Intro to Painting series. Okay. So there you go. You've got, and again, this here we can throw in the recycling if you want, or you can keep it, because if you're not happy with this, you can do it again, or you can choose different colors the next time you do it. Okay, so, and that looks like it's upright. I mean, it's just a bunch of circles, but I just want to make sure, yeah, that's the right way up, right? That's one of the kind of the jokes about abstract art. We can have a lot of fun talking about this, right? Art should be fun, especially when you're making art. We can get really serious about it, but I think it's, for an intro painting class, we want to keep things light. Right, and it is kind of, once you're done, I mean, what's to stop you from hanging it on your wall like that, or even crooked? I mean, so, okay. So here's the beginning of our painting, right? And I think, so we've covered our image transfer. The next thing that I want to talk about is doing the Imprimatura. And the Imprimatura is a fun word to say. It's an Italian word that means the first layer of paint. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a color over top of this to get started. Now, if we look back at the original, it looks like he probably painted, this is, I think, a watercolor painting, and we're going to be using acrylic. It's hard to say I doubt he would have done what we're about to do here. It's less common to do on watercolors, even though watercolorists do what's called a wash. But since there is a lot of this nice golden yellow color in here, which just so happens to be a lot like the warm yellow I typically use for this process, I'm going to do it anyway. And I think it's just going to save ourselves a little bit of time, because this color we're about to put in is going to sort of shine through in a number of places. Okay, so once I've got a little bit of paint onto my palette, I'm going to put some water. And this is, again, I say it all the time, but this is the only time I ever use water when I'm making an acrylic painting, besides cleaning my brushes with it. So I put a little bit of water in here, and then I'm just gonna stir it up. Little palette, stir it up. I don't know why I'm so cheery today. My daughter and I, we went for a big long walk in the pouring rain, and I think just seeing her splashing in puddles giddily for several hours just sort of made me pretty cheery and happy, right? It's like it just is a good reminder that, like, you know, not to overcomplicate life, right? There's lots of things that are worth getting, you know, worked up about, but I want to, my painting time is a sacred time. It's a time where I can shut the outside world off and have a little bit of fun, focus on growing and learning, and here I get to meet a whole bunch of new cool people. Okay. So, I just put this paint on, and then I'm just gonna, you can see I also did all the edges, right? I like getting the edges of my canvas. That's just something I've been doing for 20 plus years, and I've talked about that many times before. I just think it's kind of nice to have that little bit of yellow showing through, or, you know, many artists, you know, using this yellow is definitely not common. I'm probably the only one who does this on the planet Earth, besides anybody else who might be following and watching. But typically, artists, even someone like Wassily Kandinsky, would do an Imprimatura like this. It just would be a little bit more nuanced. Probably not a warm yellow like this, but more of a kind of an earthy brown, or what we call like a yellow ochre. Okay. So I'm going to let this sit there and dry. The paintbrush I just used, right? What I'm going to do is just wipe off all that excess paint. And then once I've wiped it off, then I'm going to put it in the water here just to get all the extra paint off. I always find it easier if you wipe off the paint onto a cloth or a rag or paper towel first, then your water doesn't instantly turn whatever color was on your brush, and then you have, because then you're having to change that water every 5 minutes because there's constantly lots of water in there, or lots of paint in the water. I mean, hopefully there's lots of water in there. Okay, so let's just move this little fella off to the side here, and let's talk about the biography of Wassily Kandinsky. And this just reminded me I failed to cue this up, so I want to get a few things up here. Okay. So today we're just going to do a very, very basic introduction. We're going to be doing a much more complex Wassily Kandinsky painting on Thursday. It's another one of his most famous paintings. It's in the Guggenheim Museum in New York. But for our purpose, we're just going to do a very quick introduction, just so we can kind of have a little bit of an idea who this artist was and why we're studying from him. So Wassily Kandinsky was born in Moscow, Russia, and he grew up in Odessa, which is in Ukraine, and spent kind of his childhood as well as his kind of early formative education was studying at the art school in Odessa. And then after that period of time, he travels. In fact, let's just maybe look at his art while we're just talking about his images here, or his Biography. So he, after finishing school in Odessa, he sort of he does a lot of traveling. He was somebody who liked to travel in that kind of Eastern Europe, Western Europe kind of area. So these are probably some of the paintings he would have made around the time of finishing school. After he finished school, he actually studied to become a lawyer and an economist, and so he began with this art training, and then probably, like a lot of people, well, I've got to do something responsible to make money or to fall back on, and so he studies law, and he actually becomes a good enough lawyer that he's asked to become the chair of the law society. I think it was Munich where he was at that time. And this whole time he's doing a little bit of art in his spare time, and I'm not exactly sure what, but it spurs him on thinking, you know what, I'm just going to dive in. I'm going to do this for a little while. He goes back to school, studies a little bit more, and at that period of time, Impressionism has already happened, and now we're in the post-Impressionist phase. The most famous post-Impressionists would be Vincent van Gogh and Paul Gauguin, who we're going to be doing a bunch of Gauguin and Van Gogh paintings upcoming soon. So, what is, I see somebody say, am I banned? Jean, why no other messages? You haven't been banned. I'm the only one who can ban anybody. So Kandinsky is interested in Impressionism, Post-Impressionism, and we see that in many of his early artworks. And then, you know, what happens around the early turn of the century, you know, the early 1910s, is there's a lot of instability in the world, which finally has the outbreak of World War I, and then the Russian Revolution. And Kandinsky comes back to Moscow around the time of the Russian Revolution, because that's also a very hopeful time for artists in Russia, because there's a sense that anything is possible. There's photos of Vladimir Lenin with many of the famous Russian artists at the time, and so artists were thinking, wow, man, we're going to change the whole society. We're going to have this avant-garde art revolution. And for a short period of time, that's true. There's this Russia, for a short period of time, is the center of the modernist revolution. Of course, it doesn't last that long, and Kandinsky leaves Russia, I think, around, was it 1921, 1922, and he moves back to Germany, where he becomes one of the leading figures in what is in the Bauhaus school of art and architecture. And, you know, so we see kind of the work that he's doing in that period of time. And so, again, a lot of more figurative artwork, you know, representational paintings. So this is sort of what he was up to. A lot of very, like, fanciful kind of illustrative kind of stuff too. A lot of this stuff is not as well, you know, regarded as I suppose the work that he's most famous for, which we'll come up to here. Let me see. And then we could start to see these little bits of breakthroughs, right? Paintings like this where he's playing with these sort of kind of characters, but the color starts to take over. And more color. It just becomes overwhelming color. And this is generally regarded as his kind of first real abstract painting. You know, the first abstract watercolor is the title. It's probably not him who gave his art that title. That's usually, which is not uncommon. Often artists don't title their works, or they're titled after they died in many cases. But we can see all of these works now. Whatever was in there, landscapes, cityscapes, people, all of that starts to disappear. And eventually, here we're coming up to today's painting. Right, so you know, he's also like really interested, like he's obviously playing with color. He's interested in how all of these colors match up and interact with one another together. And here we are. So today's painting actually was, he didn't intend it to be a finished artwork that would one day be on the wall of a museum, which it is today. He was doing it as sort of a test. I mean, we could see that right in the name of it, a color study, squares with concentric circles. Obviously, it's taken on a life of its own, and probably at some point, you know, it's in his studio, or somebody comes in and goes like, wow, I love that one, I'll buy it. And he's like, no, it's just, I just use it kind of like, you know, our color wheels that we have, right, that we did in our very first intro classes here. Right, and they're just on the wall, and somebody's like, "Oh, how much for those?" Well, I use these to help me make my paintings. Oh, that's all right. Well, how much is it then? It must be even more important, right? And you're like, "Well, I guess that's right. I will sell it to you." So it's, you know, I was thinking about this today. It reminds me, I was just watching a few weeks ago that Beatles Get Back documentary, and there's places where they're goofing around and they're just singing like, I went outside and stomped in some puddles, jumped in the mud and got 'em on my pants. And at the bottom it says, you know, muddy puddles, Lennon and McCartney. and it's literally, you know, they own the rights to that song, even though it was just tossed off a silly thing in the studio. It's the same sort of thing here. This is something that might have been tossed off, but has taken on a life of its own, right? So, how about let's kind of stop there for the biography, and then we can talk about the next step. You know, traditionally, artists would do the Imprimatura, which is generally just a stain on the canvas. And then after the stain, an artist might then go and start painting some lines over top of here. The image, you might be sketching in a landscape or a vase of flowers with your paintbrush. That would be called your underpainting. Now, today's painting, I don't think we need to do an underpainting. It's fairly straightforward. So usually what I do next is I work from the background to the foreground. So we start, you know, with whatever shapes are in the background, and then kind of work our way up to the top, so that we have all these kind of background, foreground, background, foreground. For today's painting, because it's this abstract painting where there's really no foreground or background, we can kind of start anywhere we want, right? So I think then what we want to do here is just get some paint and put it on the palette, and then just start having some fun. Now, we can do our best to try to reproduce the painting that we see there on the screen right now. You can also just have a lot of fun putting colors in random places, and you can feel completely free and liberated to experiment. You could be painting this with a very young person in your family, and maybe if they're so young they are unable to hold a paintbrush, you can just say, hey, what color do you think I should put in this circle? What color do you think I should put there? And then you can complete it for them. Okay, so I'll just show you. I'm getting all of my colors onto the canvas here. And if you're watching me for the very first time and you want to know what colors I'm using, I did do, again, a full 5-episode series talking about which colors, which brands, you know, what paintbrushes. I kind of go into pretty deep detail, so I'm not going to repeat it all here. And there is information in the description below about what these are. But essentially, what we're using here is called a split primary palette. So we got 2 yellows, 2 reds, and 2 blues, right? We've got a cold yellow, meaning it's got a little bit of greenish quality to it, and our warm yellow has got a bit of an orange quality to it, right? We got our warm red, which also has a bit of a orangey quality. So these are going to make a really nice bright orange together. We've got our cool red, which is basically a magenta, so it looks quite pink, right? So a cool red wants to go towards the rest of the cool colors, which are hanging out here by the blue and the cool yellow. So it's going to make a really lovely purple when we mix it with our warm blue. And our warm blue, this is an aquamarine blue, and it wants to go and pal around with the other warm colors over here, right? So that's really important, that if we want a nice purple, we're going to mix these two colors together. And then lastly, we've got our cool blue, right? Which is like a cerulean blue, cyan blue. And when we mix our cool blue and our cool yellow together, we're going to get this beautiful, bright emerald green, right? And then once we start mixing colors across the color wheel, things just get all super silly. Essentially, when we're mixing, and there's a future episode coming up all about this, but when we mix colors across the color wheel, they get close to what we call the neutral core, and things start getting a little bit more brown or grayish, right? Especially if we add some white into the center. So that's just probably enough of a little bit of a review to get us started. So, and maybe I'll put a bit of white in here as well. Oh. And it's okay to laugh when the paint squeezes out of the tube and makes a fart sound, right? In fact, if you don't laugh to the fart sounds your paint make, I think you're taking this a little bit too seriously, right? Okay, so where should we begin? It's totally up to you. So if you want, you can just hang out with me and make today's painting and paint whatever colors you like. If you want, you can also paint exactly what I'm doing as I'm painting it. I'm going to do my best to try to reproduce what you see on the screen right now, but it's entirely possible that if I mix a color that I really, really like, I'm probably just going to use it, and I'll try to find a place for it, right? So, generally the way that I like to work is probably, if I can, work from kind of left to right, top to bottom. Because I'm right-handed, that just makes it easier so that if paint is wet, I'm not stamping my hand all over the place. But I will say, if there's a color, let's say like a blue in here, I'll probably mix that blue and then put it all over, so I'm not having to mix that same color 2, 3, 4 times, right? It's much easier if I just mix it once and paint it once. So, how about since I just said I like to kind of start in the top right, how about we start with this red here in the top left corner? Okay, so that red, in fact, let's get them side by side here. That red, I think, is pretty close just to our warm red right out of the tube, right? There is potentially a little, it gets a little bit darker inside here, but I think, again, this is our first class. Let's just take it real simple and easy here. So I've got, this is going to be blue. Let's do the red around it. All right. And then I'm going to do another red around here. And again, if you don't have these lines on there, it's pretty easy to draw this whole thing out. And don't worry about making it perfect. Do you see how now that we've got this warm yellow over top of here, we probably don't even need to paint this yellow circle there at all either. It's already kind of there. So how about I'm going to do another big red circle down here. I'm just going to go and do all of the red on this entire painting all at once. And it's okay, you know, I have done the outline, which is a tracing of the original, and I may go outside the lines a little bit. Oh no! It's okay. It's okay if you go outside the lines. I promise you I will not leap through the World Wide Web and appear on the other side and slap your hand for going outside of the lines. Okay. Now, it's possible that some of this red, for instance, could be a little bit darker, but I think it's always hard to say how dark a color actually is until we get more paint on this palette. So I'm reluctant to kind of go too dark too quickly, because I want to be able to see if, you know, when I get some other colors around it, that color might sort of change, which sounds kind of crazy. Well, it's not going to, you know, like magic change, but visually for me it might look a little bit darker or lighter depending on, especially on this one here. You know, we're going to put this kind of really dark, I don't know, kind of like a teal, really, really dark teal right next to it, and that might actually make this feel a little bit lighter. It might even feel a little bit darker. And the cool thing with acrylic painting is we can paint over top of the colors, so we can always make it darker or lighter after it's dried, right? So that's what I'm going to do here. Now right here, this one is a red that's going to go a little bit more orange-like right here. So I might just leave it like that. Okay. Let's paint this whole thing in here. There's a ton of comments in the chat there, so give me a moment to make a little bit of headway here, and I'll take a look at all the comments. You know, one of the things that always comes up whenever we're doing abstract painting is somebody will make the inevitable comment, will say, my kid could paint that. Right? And which I always say, like, man, if your child can make a painting like this as good as Kandinsky, then run. Don't walk. Run to get your child some art supplies and put them to work, because they are going to make you rich. Because making any artwork, I've taught children how to paint, and you know, children can do a really great job, but even just holding a paintbrush for anyone, if you're not used to it, is kind of tricky, let alone being able to use it with any level of precision. And the big thing with like making art is not just the technical aspects of being able to paint properly, it's the ideas. How do you use your imagination to express the thoughts and feelings that you have inside of you? And that is something that takes a great deal of talent and ability to do. So there's lots of great artists, or artists I think are great artists, that haven't really gotten respect or recognition because the art world gatekeepers just don't think that what they have to say is interesting enough. Often it's because, oddly enough, it's because there are artists who paint very realistically. Often they are like not seen as being particularly innovative. They're just doing illustrating things in life like animals and portraits and stuff. I think that's pretty silly. Nevertheless, that idea persists. Okay. So I'm going to complicate some of these colors, probably by adding a little bit of my cool red over top of it. And you'll see there's a few places where maybe a little bit of color is quote-unquote missing, but I'm going to probably paint other colors in those areas. In fact, maybe here's one area where I think a color was kind of missing. Okay. So I'm just gonna, actually I was gonna clean my brush, but I think I'm gonna mix maybe an orange right now. Why not? If you've got a little bit of red on here and we're gonna need to make an orange at some point, why not, rather than just going to the trouble of cleaning this brush, let's just use it. So let's take some of this warm red and some warm red as well, and we'll just mix these together. Right, just see how easy that is to mix those two colors together. If it's too dark of a red, what I would probably do, let's say if I mixed it like this and it came out like that, you're like, oh, I'd probably have to use all of this yellow to lighten it up. So what I would do is just sort of wipe any excess paint off and then just try mixing it again, side next to it, right? Because otherwise it's going to use up so much paint just trying to lighten that color. It's much easier to darken a color than it is to lighten a color. Always remember that. Okay, so now let's look here and just think about what areas could use some orange. Well, again, what I'm going to do is when I get to a place like this, if I try to rest my hand on here to paint, I might get paint all over the bottom of my hand. So one thing I like to do is use my finger to kind of prop up the brush. Right? See how my finger is kind of just being, it's like I've got a tripod or something, right, for my finger, and I plop it down, and that way I can do something, let's say like painting in here without having to worry about my arm getting all over, right? I can just use my finger to stick like that, and there we go. Okay, so let's look for other orange places, right? Could be a real fun exercise to do with small children if they're painting with you. Is like, spot the orange. Can you guys see where the orange goes next? There it is. There's the orange. Okay, and then here this orange sort of seems to kind of go back into the yellow, so I'm just going to use my finger to blend it in and smudge it out a little bit. It looks like there's maybe even a bit of orange in here. And look at that, I'm painting all over top of my red. Oh no, oh, it's gone. I just brush it away with a little bit of my finger. Right, in fact, let's just zoom in a little bit. Okay, so this is where I'm painting right there. And again, I'm using a brush that's a little bit smaller than my half the size of my fingernail, my index finger. But I have lots of brushes that are much smaller than this, right? I've got a brush that size, right? So it's much smaller. So I'm not using the smallest brush I have, nor am I using like a giant brush either. Right? We're just kind of having fun. We're just learning a little bit about how to mix some paints. Okay. And you know what? I'm going to paint this up here orange. Even though it's actually a little bit more red, I'm just going to leave it like that. Why not, right? We got a lot of orange. So now I'm going to move over to this one here. And I'm going to paint some orange right in here. And you can leave little gaps of the yellow underneath there if you like. Okay, that feels pretty good. Where's some more orange? Anybody see the more? Oh, I see some orange down here. Okay, let's go right down there. Okay. There's not much, but maybe a little bit right in here, right? You can see I've gone over a little bit. That's okay. Whoa, I've gone outside the lines. Someone call the painting police. Oh my goodness. I see a little bit of orange right here. There we go. So let's go to this one. That's this right here. It's kind of a little bit orange on the corner. Maybe a bit over top of here. Maybe a bit of orange even inside here. I can paint over top of that a bit. Maybe I'll put a bit of orange underneath here. Why not, right? Maybe it's a little bit more yellow. So if I want it to be a bit more yellow, I'm just going to use my finger and smudge it out so a little bit more of that yellow shows back up there. Okay. Now I see a little bit of yellow here, but it's almost a little bit more warm yellowish. So I'm just going to add more warm yellow. There's a little bit of orange on my brush, but I want it to just be mostly yellow. Not very orange at all. All right, so here's where this is. So I'm going to paint... Where am I? Maybe I'm in the wrong square. That's all right. Okay. How about up here? We see a little bit of that there. So I'm going to come back up here. Let's paint a bit of this. I kind of like the same color that I'm painting with here, so I'm going to put it there. And maybe again, just use my finger. You can use a rag to do this if you like. I just like using my finger because I feel like I have more control than I might otherwise have without it. And, you know, if we wanted to really mix this color, we would probably add actually a little bit of black in here, but I'm just going to do this with the same orange that I have right here. I want to keep today's painting as relatively simple as possible. Okay, so now that I'm done with the orange, I don't think I'm going to use any more of it. Now's a good time to clean my brush. Lots of comments in here. And lots of familiar names and faces. Okay. So let me just take a quick look through. Wow, my goodness, there's a lot of comments. So there's Paula and Kathy and Roxana. Roxana says, first painting. Yes, we're going to do the first painting you've ever... Maybe, is it your first painting you've ever done, Roxana? That's so exciting. There's Lolly and Deborah. Roxana says, is there a guideline as to what brush to use? Hopefully I've answered that question as we went along here. You can use any brush that you feel comfortable with. You know, it is worth just mentioning. That's, you know, it's great. You know, I'm always the one, whenever I take classes, and I still to this day love taking classes, I like asking questions. And I'm always the person in the classroom who's like always raising their hand, and everyone's like, ugh, not that guy again. But by the end, I know about as much as the instructor knows about things, because I'll ask like every random bizarre question possible. So if you're that kind of person, bring them my way. I love it. We're like-minded folk. But I'll just sort of, to answer your question, you know, there's, let me get maybe larger brushes to explain this. You know, there's different, the two main types of brushes you see are ones that are flat or square versus a round brush. It's a little bit more pointy. Personally, I tend to use these brushes way more often. I like them in all sorts of different sizes. I've got like dozens of all sorts of different sizes of these square brushes. I also have lots of different sizes in the round brushes. I just tend to find I use the round brushes for much smaller detail. But that's a personal preference. It's not a requirement. You can use whatever just feels good, and I encourage you to experiment and try to experiment with different brushes. It's almost worth a different video to go in and explain kind of the pros and cons of each brush. So I think I'll just leave it. I'm going to make a mental note to think about making a video like that. Because there's you know, we can get really complex about anything when it comes to painting. Every topic and idea is the first sentence to somebody else's PhD thesis, right? So it's always a little bit of like, is that really important for people to know right now? I think for our purpose, it's just what feels best for you. Right? When you're trying, like, I would probably say using a square brush like this, I think maybe for some beginners might be a little bit complicated, because what I'm often doing with a square brush is taking it and rotating it. You can see I turn it in my finger, by turning it on its side, it becomes a lot more like a round brush. And then I can straighten it back up. Maybe it's easier again if we see this with a larger brush. Like often I'll be painting like this, and then I can just turn it up onto its edge, and you can see here it becomes like, I can do with a square brush, I can do some really tiny detail because I'm just using the tip of it, right? And you can do the same thing with a much larger brush. Let's see, you know, we can do similar kind of thing with a much larger brush, right? And just get the very tip of things. Really great question. It's something that kind of bears, again, a little bit more thought on my side of things. I love great questions, great questions. Lolly says, Lolly says, I'm not sure if you saw my comment on your channel, but I wanted to let you know that I thought your work, maybe that's for Deborah, was amazing. There's my good old friend Sam, who's playing the music that you hear in the background right now. It's nice to see you, Sam. Jean says, is it an exercise about color relation? So we're just getting started, Jean. We're just starting right at the very basics, but we can talk about how these colors relate to one another as we go, for sure. Absolutely. You know, if you're tuning in because you want to see, you know, you want to think about the real complex ideas behind Wassily Kandinsky's work, tune in on Thursday, because we're going to be doing a much more complex painting, and we can talk a little bit more about the more complex concepts and ideas behind his theories on color. He's also, Kandinsky, famous for, one of his most famous things is not even a painting or a drawing, it's a text he wrote called On the Spiritual and Art, I think it's called. And it's I remember reading it when I was in art school, right? And so he really thought color had spiritual significance. So we can talk about that on Thursday. Jean says, "Oh, finally, I'm happy to see I'm not banned yet." Okay. Did you get banned from a lot of places, Jean? So we'll keep an eye out for you, that if you're letting us know that you sometimes get banned. Yeah, chat is sometimes quiet if people are painting. That's true, Lolly. Kevin, lots of hearts and love. God bless us all, worldwide family. Sean says, I'm the kind of person that says what he thinks and critiques easily, but it's for good, to improve, always going for better, and a lot of people take it bad and ban me. Oh, okay. Oh, Donna says, I'm getting stronger. I drove my car for the first time yesterday in almost 4 months. Great job. Great to hear you're on the mend, Donna. We're looking forward to you back at the easel making your paintings again. Jean's going to paint this only in black and white, orange, red, and magenta. No cyan or purple or green. Cool. Whoa, lots of new comments. How about I'll come back? There's lots of comments filtering in, maybe in response to what I'm saying, so let's just get maybe a little bit more color on here and then continue. Okay, so let's look at what should be the next color we talk about here. We've done our red and our orange, and we can already, our first layer of paint, the Imprimatura, was that warm yellow. So we've kind of done the warm yellow already, which is one of the great reasons for putting a large wash over the entire painting, like all the great masters throughout history have done, because it saves us time, right? So what would be the natural next thing? I think if we want to do any magenta, which we will, I think we'll save that till we get maybe some other colors in here. How about we do some blue? Let's take our warm blue and put that in here. Now I have a feeling, so this is my warm blue, my ultramarine blue. I have a feeling if I paint this right now, it's going to be a little bit dark. So actually, I was going to paint it down here, but I think it's going to be maybe darker than I would like. So what I'm just doing, just to show you how dark it will be, I think I'm going to, this area right here looks like it's kind of dark. So I'm going to paint this warm blue right up here, and it shows you how dark this warm blue actually looks when it's on top of this warm yellow. Right? So that might be a little bit too dark if I put it down here, right? In fact, there's maybe a little bit more of it I can put up here. Smudge it in a little bit with my finger. Okay. So in order, what I want to do is lighten this up a little bit. I'm going to take a bit of white. I don't want to do too much, because white not only is going to lighten the color, but it's also got quite powerful tinting strength, which means it's going to block out any color that was underneath it. So I'll put a little bit of this white. You can see this starts to goes a little bit more pastel. So let's see if a little bit of that white in there, what effect it has. Now, I notice this, to me, looks like it might have been even still a little bit too much white, but that's okay. Sometimes you're going to have to go a little bit too far, so that when we come back here and add, I'm going to paint over top of it with the warm blue again once this dries. And you're going to see it's going to look much different, even though that warm blue will be here, than it does than that warm blue. And I think that's a really useful thing for people to see, especially our beginners who are, you know, just learning, right? Because the white in here not only is kind of lightening this color up and making it look a little bit more like a baby blue, but it's also blocking out a significant amount of that warm yellow that we painted there originally. So let's do a little bit more of that. Let's look for other places where we could put this color. I see it over here in the top right. Again, I'm going to paint it a little bit lighter. Let's see. It's kind of hard to know where to put some of these colors, so I'm just, if I get them kind of quote-unquote wrong, I think I'm going to be okay. Now that color is a little bit, I think, just a little bit closer to the original. So I'm going to be pretty happy with that. Maybe let's put this color right down here. Again, my warm blue. Let's put it in here too. And maybe this time I'm just going to go back to my blue, and I'm just taking my brush that I just painted with here, and I'm just going to add more blue back into it. All right, so much less white, and I'm going to try painting this in here. So it's going to go darker, but since it's still got a little bit of white in it, it's not going to go quite as dark as these ones did, right? So see, that looks okay. I'm pretty happy with that. Maybe for this one, I think I want a little bit more of that white back, right? So I'm just going to take my brush, get a tiny bit of white back on there, and paint this here. Again, if you're painting along and you're starting to get like, oh no, he's going way too fast. Oh, this is a disaster. Oh, what was I thinking trying to take an art class? Don't worry. You can always pause the video and paint and catch up to where I am. You can also just decide, you know what, it's okay. I'm just learning. I'm going to just allow myself to maybe paint colors as I see them. And then you can kind of watch and compare and go like, oh, that's interesting how he did that. That's good to know. I'll do it a little bit different next time. Right? There's always next painting. You don't have to make this painting perfect. Right? Just think about the first time you ever learned to walk. You probably don't remember that, right? But you know, I'm a father of a 2.5-year-old child, and learning to walk was a difficult process. And it's like, oh, there's a reason why we don't remember a lot of those moments. because it's not a lot of fun. If we remembered how difficult some of that stuff was, we would be really, really bummed out all the time, right? So painting, we're learning something new for the first time, so it can be a little bit more difficult, right? You just have to keep on going. Don't give up. So let's look at this area. I'm going to put kind of maybe a little bit of this blue with some white in. And then I'm going to just sort of I'm going to paint some darker blue in that place in a moment. Okay. I think I'm happy. Have I got everything in there? Maybe let's put a bit of this here, actually. And I'll show you what we can do. So let's say we paint this here, right? And we feel like, I want it to be darker, but I'm just going to take a rag and I'm just going to wipe some of this away. Maybe not all of it. But what's going to be neat is when I paint the warm blue back over top of it, it's going to look a little bit different than this and a little bit different than this. Right, that's the wild, neat thing about painting. It's just like how everything is constantly kind of transforming, and I know for a beginner artist that can feel really overwhelming. That's why we want to just start at the basics. And if you're not happy with the way this painting turns out, or any other painting you're working on turns out, you don't have to show it to anybody, right? It didn't happen, right? Whatever happens in your paint studio can stay in your paint studio if you wanted to, right? I mean, and actually, what's interesting about that is, I talk about this all the time, when we go see art in museums, we are seeing the very best of an artist, the stuff they want us to see. We don't see all the stuff that went into the trash or that they painted over. We're only seeing the very best stuff. So always remember that, right? Because sometimes you walk in and be like, wow, look at all this incredible stuff. I guess none of these people ever made a mistake ever in their life. They're perfect. No. Especially if you read artist biographies, most artists are far from perfect, right? Including myself, right? I've never made any claim to being perfect. Okay. So, what should we do next? That should be a game show. And what should we do next? How about, I guess, why don't we make a purple? We got a few purples in here. So, to make a purple, I'm going to take some of my warm blue. And I'm going to take some of my cool red. Right? And I'm going to mix these together. And depending on how much of each color I make, it is going to result in different kinds of purple. Right? If I put more blue in here, I'm going to get a more bluish purple. If I put more red, I'll get more of a magenta, right? So it's up to you. I mean, let's see if we make, here's one type of a purple. Right? That's a little bit more magenta red. Right? And then let's go for a little bit more of this kind of a purple. Right? Totally different purple. So, now the same sort of thing is going to happen. If we put this purple right down here, it's going to behave just like this did, right? And it's going to get really dark. In fact, let's see if is there a place on here where we have a really, really dark purple? Maybe right here. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to paint it here, and you're going to see, like, you're going to be like, ugh, that's a real ugly purple. It's just real dark and brown, and it's just, that's not the kind of vibrant purple I have in mind when I think of purple. Right? It's because there's the yellow that's in behind here that is mixing in inside of our brains. right? And that's causing it just to look much darker, right? It's because yellow and purple are opposite from one another on the color wheel, right? So we've got yellow here, we've got purple down here. When we have our purple and we paint it over top of the yellow, it's like we're mixing them together. And when we mix two colors opposite from one another, they are going to go towards the neutral core, and that's where everything gets brown and gray, right? So if you want that to happen, that's great. If you don't want it to happen, then you're going to do what we're going to do next here, which is to add a little bit of white in here. And maybe let's just do this to the side. I'm going to put this white here. And let's take some of the same color that we were just painting with. I'm just going to put it over here. Okay. Because I think I want to paint this area purple. And if I want it to be a little, you know, I might say, well, that's kind of nice, but it's a little bit too white. It's been tinted too much. What we can do is just let this dry and paint this same color over top of it again without any white, and it will probably be a lot closer to what you have in your imagination. So let's do this again. Let's take a bit more of this purple. I'm just going to mix it in with a bit more white. And let's do this right up here. There we go. Again, it's a little bit lighter, but I think we'll mix some more purple into it in a bit. Now we have this purple over here, which is definitely a little bit darker. So I think I'm just going to take this same purple. I'm going to put just a little bit of white into it, maybe not quite as much. And then I'll probably paint over top of it later. Now it's going a little bit kind of reddish. Let's just take a bit more blue and put that back in. Wow, look how dark that is, right? So that's because there's very little white in here. So it's absorbing more of the yellow that was underneath. And it's kind of mixing inside of our brains. Isn't that wild? Okay. Yeah, it looks like I maybe missed a little bit of the blue that I was thinking about putting in, but I think that's more of a cool blue. So maybe we'll talk about that when we get closer to that. So let's just see. Any more purple that needs to be painted here before I wash my brush? Act now or forever hold your peace. I think I am okay. So let's take this. I'm going to clean this off. And I'm going to just clean the paint off. Again, you see I wiped all that purple off my brush and then just splattered water on here. If you get at it quickly enough, you can avoid having it take away any paint. But anyway, I just put some of... I was trying to explain why that water did just suddenly go purple, because I wiped most of it off on the brush, on the cloth. Okay, just see in the comments there, we've got Ravi says, hello, I'm painting along. I've done a little bit of my own variation. That's exciting. And Jean says, for the moment, I'm trying to understand the mindset of the artist. Why these choices? Sometimes the rings aren't in only one color. Sometimes it isn't really round. I'm trying to get an idea of something. So, you know, again, I think Kandinsky was probably just playing here. I'm not sure. I don't really think he was... I mean, I mean, I think he was exploring color combinations and seeing what different colors look like when they're side by side, for sure. But I don't know if he took this particular painting super seriously. I think it was done as a color study, literally what the title is. Tanya says, I was wondering if Kandinsky did the wash of yellow. Did Michael mention it already? So I don't think he did this wash of yellow. I think if we just look, at the original, we can see that there's the white of the, I think this is watercolor paper that he's painting on coming through, right? So that's a kind of a signal that this is probably painted directly onto white. And then you can see where he's painted this yellow over top of the white, and it's even going over top of the blue, etc. I've just done the yellow because it just saves us a little bit of time, and it's also kind of part of the way that I do most of my paintings. So Jean says, sorry for such text, but read it, guys and girls. I think I say interesting things. By the way, I want to know if there's a background, history, ideas behind this art. Yeah, I think I am totally on color theory and relation. Tony says, wondering why start with the yellow wash. So we've talked about why I use that yellow wash many times. I talked about that in one of the first videos that we did. I think it's in the second episode, because that's how we prepare it, and I have a whole graphic on the screen talking a little bit about that. So I think I'm just going to keep on moving forward here. So what do I want to do next? I think I'm looking at a few places where I see maybe I need a little bit more blue again. Maybe in the top left corner up here. I think I'm going to add a little bit of this blue. I'm going to make it a little bit more transparent. Now, if you're using watercolors, you can just add a little bit of water. What I'm going to do is add some matte medium here. And matte medium is far more desirable than adding water to your acrylics, because remember, we use water to clean our brushes, right? So, you know, it's like saying, oh, I'm going to add a little bit of soap into my soup, right? Well, yeah, maybe, but that might really clean your insides out, right? So I'm going to put some matte medium because it's just paint without any color, without any pigment. So I'm going to put a little bit of that on my palette. And that way, now I can take this blue that's on my brush, let's get a little bit more of it. And then I can mix in my matte medium here. And yeah, it looks like exactly the same here. But what I've done is significantly reduce the amount of pigment, this blue color, that's in the actual paint itself. So it's going to be much more transparent. So let's come up here. And now I can paint with this blue. And look how much different it is. Now it dries, I find, kind of quickly. So you don't have too much time to kind of fiddle here. You want to kind of work in small areas. So I'm going to put that in here. Now, obviously, if you don't have matte medium, other things that are kind of similar would be Mod Podge. So you could use Mod Podge, which is, you know, it's an art material, but maybe more for crafting, for scrapbooks, for doing kind of children's collages, all that kind of stuff. You could use it. It is similar. It's actually got a little bit more of a glue type property, but it works well. I just don't know about its archival property, how long it will actually last, because that's one thing that artists are often concerned about is if I make this now, will it last a couple more years, or is it going to kind of slowly start to fall apart? And so it's just one of those things to kind of just be a little bit mindful of. Okay, I think I'm happy with that. In fact, you know what? Let's take... We've got this... Actually, no, that's a different kind of green. It's a cool green. So maybe let's go into the greens then. So I'm going to clean this brush off. Eileen says, did Kandinsky use oil or watercolor for this piece? I'm pretty sure that he's using watercolor to make this painting. Jean says, warm blue when purple, but cold blue when green. Has I heard in a video, I think exactly the same. We should stop with these warm or cold, especially for some situation like this. Maybe say purple blue. I don't know what that means, Jean. Yeah, so I don't know what that means. But definitely every color is either warm or cool. So if you've watched some video where somebody's telling you to not think about warm and cool colors, then I think they're really... I mean that's just wrong. I mean, it's just wrong. I'm trying to think of how to be the most kind of delicate about it, but I would be... If there's someone who's telling you there's no such thing as a warm or cool color, that's I don't know. I teach at the best university in Canada for art, and that's the way that everyone there teaches. Any other person teaching art at a professional high level or who's an artist themselves will agree with that. So whoever tells you not to think about warm and cool colors, I don't know, but it's the internet, and people go on the internet and they can find someone to support whatever wild belief they might have. So I'm going to move on. So let's now mix a green, I think. Let's take our cool blue and our cool yellow, and let's mix this together. And you can see I just had a little bit of that cool blue in my brush, and with that cool yellow we get this really nice bright candy green. I love this green. If I add more blue to it, it's just going to get into a darker, deeper green. And if I add some white to this color, especially when it's a darker green, I'm going to get it teal. All right, but we're not quite there yet, so let's see where we can use this particular green. Wondering if we can put it right up here. What do you think? That's not bad. You could see that, I mean, he's painting a little bit over top of the other colors in places. Not because he's sloppy or lazy, because I really do think he's interested. He's trying to see what those results are. Like, what's it going to look like if I paint that over top of another color? We're going to see on Thursday's painting, it's a very different painting. Somebody who was very clearly concerned about precision. So this is just a, he's playing with the color, right? As I think we should all play with color every once in a while. I'm not sure what I've done here, so let's just... Now technically this is a different kind of green that I think should go there, but I'm going to use that one there anyway. Let's take a bit of this. put it here. If you don't have matte medium and you want to make it thinner, another thing you can do is just use your finger to kind of blend things out, or use a rag, and that can kind of act in a similar sort of fashion to thinning the paint out. Maybe let's do that in here. Again, so kind of a light green. And then I'm going to come back and get a little bit more of this cool blue on here. And maybe I'm just going to do that right here, right now. It might be possible that I'm going to have to do another little coat of this green. We'll see. If we want to make it a little, if we want to make it a little bit darker, I just add more blue to it, but it might get a little bit more bluish rather than green. Okay. I guess we could put a bit of this. Where is it? Yeah, in here somewhere. Any more green? Act now or forever hold your peace. Maybe put a little bit of in some of these areas here. Why not, right? I feel like I need to. Something's got to go here with this red. I don't know how I bungled that, but. Maybe I'll expand this red. Maybe I'll use some magenta there. We'll see when we get a little closer to that part. How about this area right here? We've got it's more of a teal color, and same sort of thing in here. So let's mix a teal. Let's just take some white, and if we add a little bit more blue into this color, we'll get more of a really nice teal. That's gorgeous. Love it. And then let's paint this in around here. Now, remember, it's got white in there, so it's going to cover things pretty well when I paint it over, right? So I paint over this red dot, and it's going to kind of hide a little bit of that red dot. Same thing in here. Okay, any more teal? Well, this right here, we've got a really dark teal. Right? So, to make that darker teal, what we want to do is we want to make a black. So how about let's do that next here, because we haven't made our darkest color yet. So I'm just going to wipe this off. I'm also going to clean it because I may or may not want white on there. So to make my darkest color, I'm going to need a little bit more warm red. You know what? Yeah, I'm going to add just a little bit more. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my cool blue and let's do this right here. My cool blue and warm red, we'll mix that together. Whoa, that's a dark color. It's a really, really dark, muted purple. Right? Now, this would be, we can use this if you wanted a really dark, muted purple. That would work just fine. But I think I want to add a little bit of cool yellow into this. So I add cool yellow into it. It's now going to go dark, basically a black. That's good. So now I can use this to darken any of the colors I want, including my teal color here. So I can go back to this teal. I'm just going to take a little bit of this. I don't know if I want that much on here. Okay, so as you can see, I've just put a little bit of this white in here, and it kind of goes gray. I don't want gray. I want to have a dark teal color. So take a bit more cool blue and a little bit more yellow in here. Okay. Maybe just a little bit more blue. So let's now paint there. Not bad. I think I could have gone even darker, but I'd rather go lighter and then go darker if I need to, right? Because once you've gone dark, it's really hard to lighten that same color back up again. So I think I'll leave that. There are other colors that are quite dark as well, but they're not quite teal. I mean, I could paint them in there, but I might just hold off. Sandra says, please add me. I just clicked OK. I'm not sure what was happening there. I'll take a look at some of the chat here in a moment, but I want to keep on going here. I'm going to take this dark color. Let's just add some white into it. Just make it kind of a dark. You can see it kind of goes a little bit purpley. That probably tells me I need a little bit more yellow in there if I want it to get closer, a little bit more cool yellow to get, there we go, to an actual gray. Let's take a bit more of that color back there again. And I think I'm just going to use this just like that, right? So again, this is my warm red, my cool blue, cool yellow, and white. And so I've just got a gray. Let's just keep it. I think I could dial that color in a little bit more. It's almost got a little bit more of a maybe let's go a bit more green. Just add a little bit more cool blue into here. Cool yellow. I mean, I guess I'm just being super specific when this kind of painting doesn't demand it. So now what you could see, this, my gray, you know, these two colors are pretty close in value, although I think it actually is supposed to be a little bit darker, but I think that's okay for right now. I just want to see maybe up here, if let's say I do want to go a bit darker, I'm just going to take this color, I'm going to mix it to the side and not take as much of the gray on there, because just that white is going to lighten the color up. And then okay. Anything else that needs that? Okay. I think what I want to do now is make a really dark cold blue, which I think, you know, we're pretty close, but I don't want that white on my brush. So I can just, yeah, I'll just clean my brush here. Okay. So, where's my cool blue? Here's my cool blue. Let's just take some of my dark color again. I'm going to mix that in here. Let's get a bit more of it. And then it's also mixing optically with the yellow on the canvas too, right? And if I still find that there's too much of that yellow showing through, rather than adding white to block it out, I'm just going to let it dry, and then I'll paint over it again once it's dried a bit more. Okay, let's do this over here. That feels pretty good. Maybe I'm going to take this same color that I've just mixed. Well, you know, maybe I'm just going to go back to this color and just mix it back into my dark color. And I just don't want this to get too dark. But you know, I don't mind that. Same thing. I'm gonna actually, let's put a bit of, it's still cool. Actually, this is still this cool blue. Sorry, just go jump back a bit. I think we can use this cool blue in here for this area right here. I think with that color, I'm good. Right, so now let's wash this brush. It might be worth using a little bit of white now, since because we have a few places where there is white. Before my white just gets completely tainted, it might be a good idea to actually paint with it. So I'm going to take this white. I got a lot on my brush. Just wipe a bit of that off back on my palette. There's some white. There's another shape in here. It's just going to be easier if I just paint that out. Same thing here. We got a kind of a dark green, but I'm just going to paint this out. And there was red in here, but I'm going to paint that out. It's just so much easier just to do that, and then I can paint that red back over top. Okay. So let's where is my Where have I put everything is the question. Everything's in the midst of disaster, so this is ideally you want to have your over there. So I was looking at the pink here, and I was thinking, is this a warm pink or a cool pink? And I thought, you know what? Rather than me just sort of trying to guess, why don't I use the value scale that we made prior, and we can just look at it. So here's our cool red, and here's our warm red, and here's a warm orange. And if we look at this color, everyone might see something a little bit different. Does it look a little bit more like this, or does it look a little bit more like this? It's kind of hard to say. It's almost a little bit in between here, the way that I see it. So we can do that. We can mix a little bit of both of reds and add a bit of white if we want. There's no law that prevents us from doing that. All right, so let's take a little bit of warm red. Let's take a little bit of cool red. We mix these together. Let's add a bit of white. And then we'll paint it in here. And that's pretty close. And it's sort of a good example of the fact that, oops, come on, that your painting doesn't have to be all one color or the other. There's lots of room for nuance. Well, I just got this paint on my brush. I'm going to paint this pink that's in here. Maybe it's not quite exactly this color, but I'm going to put it in here. I just always, whenever I do something like that, I got to keep my ear out for the paint police. You never know. Any moment, you know, like the Monty Python Spanish Inquisition, just the door bursts open and they haul me away, throw me into a paint dungeon for crimes against painting. I'm going to put this pink here. Was that, did anybody, oh, I thought that was the paint police there for a second. Whew, you know, just have to, it takes a lot of, you got to be careful. They're always watching you, right? Okay, so we're getting there, hey? So, there was a gray I could have used. Oh, and there was a teal that I didn't use. So often that happens. You know, you're making a painting and you're like, oh, I just cleaned my brush. Ah. Well, it's okay. We'll just go back, and even though we've mixed a color, it's probably still here on the palette. Right? And so in fact, here is this gray. I can just take some more white, and since I want something kind of light, I can just get a little bit of paint on there. Okay, let's show you where I'm talking about, right in here. Now there is a little bit of what appears to be kind of a brownish gray next to it. I think I can just paint that separately over top. I'm always trying to think to myself, what is the fastest, easiest way to do this? Not out of laziness, although, you know, maybe some people would say that. It's just like, how can I get this done in the most efficient way possible? I'm taking this gray, I'm going to brush it over top of this area up here. Kind of looks like what might have happened, so I'm just going to do that. That's the way that I see it. You see it differently? That's awesome. That's cool. That's the way I see it, right? Kind of a darker color here. Wow, lots of questions. Whoa. Lots of comments here. Where? Oh, my goodness. I gotta go back up here. The paint. Tanya says the original for this piece was in watercolor, gouache, and crayon on paper. Oh, there's Sandra's joined us. Hi, Sandra. I think, Sandra, you sent me an email. I'm sorry I haven't gotten back to you yet. I'm just a little bit overwhelmed with lots of different things going on at the moment. Tanya says, figures the one class that I missed is the important explanation. Gonna have to go back. That's the way it always is in life, right? Pascal's there. Hi, Pascal. Tanya, are you on Instagram? I'll let you guys have your conversation. Eileen says, I'm taking a class where we have to mix colors ahead of time, so it wouldn't work for this. Interesting. You have to mix your colors ahead of time. How does that even work? I've never even heard of a painting class like that. Tony says, I missed the explanation of the reasoning behind the yellow wash to start the painting. I mean, I do a yellow wash on almost 95% of the beginning of every painting. That yellow wash is called an Imprimatura, right? And the Imprimatura is the first layer of paint. Again, I talked about why we even do Imprimatura in, I think it's the video number 2 of this Master Study series. And the link to the playlist is below. But the whole idea of using the warm color, first of all, we see this warm color throughout this painting anyway, so it just saves us time. It obliterates the white surface, so when you have to worry about like making sure everything is covered within the first 5 minutes of the painting, right? Yeah, Sandra says, it's okay, Tanya, he does it every class. There you go. Pascal says, this is definitely more difficult with acrylic. It would dry quickly. Pascal says, on Tanya we use, yeah, it's the same color for every painting. Everyone's answering the question. I love it. It seems to work. Yeah, he's done this through hundreds of paintings of this channel, says Pascal. It seems to work. I appreciate it. Kathy says, thanks, Michael. I have to go now. I'm going much slower than you. I can't paint and listen as well. I'm surprised that so many people are able to follow along anyway while I'm blabbing away. That's why sometimes I just take some time just to look at some of the comments and slow down, because I've been doing this professionally for almost 30 years now, so like making my own artwork that I sell and exhibit. So when I'm painting on my own, I go really quickly, right? Because I've got other things to do in life. So I sometimes might fall into that habit. So I apologize if that happens on occasion. So, again, there's still tons of comments here. You guys have been busy. I'm just going to keep on going, and then I'll come back, and then there'll be double the amount of comments. So, what should we do next? I think what I want to do is come back to my warm blue. Because remember, I put this warm blue, and I mixed some white in there to lighten it up. because it was getting a little bit darker on with the yellow underneath. So now that I've got this warm blue, ooh, that's so rich. It's almost a little bit darker. Actually, that's fine now that I see it on camera. But you can see this this right here was my warm blue right out of the tube on top of that yellow surface. Look how different it is. In fact, let's just do this kind of right here. Right, so you can see the difference between having a little bit of white as kind of that foundational layer, and then I paint back over top of it. In fact, there's a little bit, we can paint a bit of this over top, and it's just like, it's a different world, right? Same thing here. This is a darker one, so I'm just going to paint over top of it. You can see it goes much darker as opposed to this layer where, again, I put this blue with a bit of white. And now we've got a much... In fact, let's just zoom into this area here. Right, so here's just 2 layers of ultramarine blue on its own. Here I put ultramarine blue with a little bit of white and just painted it with just straight ultramarine blue out of the tube over top of it. 2 totally different results. And then now I'm going to paint, let's paint this ultramarine blue over top of this area where I put a little bit of white, and then I kind of wiped it off. Wiped a bit of it off just to see if I could get it just a little bit of a lighter, less intense version here. And that's what it results. So we sort of got 3 different types of blue in there. It's not, I mean, it's very similar to this, but it's certainly different than that. And that's all we need to kind of show, right? Let's go, I think, let's go up to this one here. Again, I'm just going to take my warm blue out of the tube, my ultramarine blue. I'm just using my finger to smudge and blend a bit. Alright. Maybe let's take a bit more of this ultramarine blue. Okay, let's keep on going here. I'm going to go down here. Now this is much darker. If I feel like this is just too bright of an ultramarine blue, I can always go back and darken it, add a little bit of my dark color that I mixed over top of there just to make that a little bit more saturated. But let's see. We'll keep on painting and we'll see what we get when we get there, right? So let's go down here. Let's put our ultramarine blue back over here. In fact, I think what I'm going to, remember we had this was our matte medium. I'm going to take a bit of that here and just thin it out again a little bit, but this time much darker. Right, you remember I squeezed a bit of this matte medium out. Come on. Focus, you thing. Come on. Anyway, let's see if I zoom back out. So I put a bit of this there in order to actually get these areas, to thin that blue out. But maybe I just don't want to go quite such an intense dark ultramarine blue. I want to just be a little bit lighter here, just to see what results, right? So I'm just going to mix this in. There is a little bit of white in here. It's very low amount of pigment, but it's going to be a little bit different. Let's zoom in here. So you can see this here, these two. Remember, this was what this looked like before I put the blue over top of it. So now this is what results. Again, very subtle difference. But if you want to be specific, that's sort of what we want to do. We want to just kind of introduce all the different possibilities that are available to us. Again, no one would, I don't think anyway, the art police, painting police are going to bust your door down if you just painted it blue without some matte medium to thin it out. It's very, almost imperceptible difference. Let's go up here. I'm going to paint this with my ultramarine blue, my warm blue. And I don't think I'm going to go, well, it's going to like not go all the way around just to make it a little bit thinner underneath there. I think that's okay. So, how are we doing? I mean, we're pretty close to the end. I'm just trying to think about what major things we need to do here. Is there any glaring error? I mean, there's a few little tiny details, but I think we're getting closer. I think I want to add some cool blue into this area here. Okay. And you know what? I'm going to paint this cool blue over top of this green that I had. Wow, that is really nice, actually. So this was going to be warm blue before, but again, I'm just, as I warned, I might just go off the script a bit, and I kind of like the way that turned out. It's, again, a little bit of a different blue than this, almost imperceptibly so. Probably on camera they look the same, but to my eye, we've got a much different effect that I really, really like. And if you're making a painting and you get something you really, really like, in fact, you know what? I'm liking it so much, I'm just going to keep on going with this cool blue. And if somebody just keeps an eye out for me and see if the painting police bust in while I'm doing this, I would appreciate that, because I'm really walking a fine line here, folks. It's getting pretty dangerous. Okay. Now that is another warm, that's supposed to be a warm blue, but hey, I'm gonna put some cool blue in here because I just fell in love with cool blue right now. I don't know how long this romance is going to last, but for now, that was the result right there. Okay, so we're going to keep on going. You can really see how those colors, oops, you know, I want to put some teal here. I forgot that teal. Where do we want? So let's take our cool yellow and our cool blue and a little bit of white again. Now if we have a little bit more of a green as opposed to, you know, if it's more yellow and blue, then we get this kind of more winter green color as opposed to a teal. And this is also just a gorgeous color. That's gorgeous. I mean, it is really neat. Like, the colors that he's chosen to do this with, I mean, it does look pretty cool. Like, when they start all coming together, it's like, ah, maybe this guy knew a little something about painting. Who would have figured, right? One of the most famous artists in human history knew what he was doing. Surprise, surprise. Okay. Okay, so here's another little instance. In this area right here, we've got this little bit of a darker, warm yellow. It almost seems like it's a little bit dirty. It's like we're taking the dirty paint from in here, which you could do, right? If you were doing with watercolor, that's a technique that watercolorists do use, is they do use the dirty water sometimes. But it doesn't work quite so well with painting. So instead, I'm going to, remember, this is the dark color that I mixed before. This is my warm red, warm blue, or sorry, let me start again. This was warm red, cool blue, and cool yellow. Mix that together, we get essentially a black. I'm just going to take a little bit of it and just mix that into my paint. All right, so now I've kind of made this color a little bit dirty. Let's take a little bit more, just for added emphasis. Right, and then now, when we paint this in here, it kind of simulates that effect. That looks actually really cool. Anywhere else that needs that? What if I just paint this a little bit over top? Well, you know what? Remember I said there was a little bit of brown here? To get that brown, what we can do is take some of our warm red, our cool, sorry, warm, to get a brown, we're taking warm red, warm yellow, and a little bit of warm blue. And we mix this in here. And depending on how dark that brown gets, we just add more and more blue to the mixture. I think that's pretty good, though. I want a little bit on the lighter side of things. Okay. And so then I'm going to take that and paint my brown. Right around there. Do we have any more brown? I think that might be the only brown. You could say there was a little bit of brown in here. I think that's good. Okay, so we're getting close to the end. Oops, was that on autofocus the whole time? Hopefully I wasn't making so many comments. Pascal says, by the way, Tanya, the color courses of the past 4 weeks are great to watch and rewatch. Super useful tips, really worth listening at full attention, trying what he shows so you experiment with the colors and see what happens. Thanks for saying so, Pascal. I appreciate that. So Tiny says, right now I'm just watching, not painting. I find that I need to watch the paintings and try on my own while I paint in tandem. I have heard that from a number of people. Watch the episode and then they paint afterwards, which I know can make for a long episode. But, you know, I think you can also paint, like get started and do a little bit, and then maybe you watch for a bit and then come back and rewind. Eileen says, wow, this painting is not as easy as it looked at first. Pascal says, this painting is full of traps. Whoa, there's so many more comments. The paint, LOL, paint please. Sean says, simple explanation. When you say warm blue, how am I supposed to understand that you speak of reddish blue and not yellowish blue? I did a whole, like, 2.5 hour long episode on color temperature, Jean. So, Roxanne says, question, and I think we just did that last week. So again, it's in the playlist down below for the Master Study course. I think it's episode 3. It's all about color temperature. 3 or 4. Roxanne says, question mark. Or Michael. My last name's Markowsky. My first name's Michael. You're not. I get that pretty much once a day. Somebody calls me Mark. So I'm used to it. I just might as well just make the correction now. Okay, so if you're playing abstract, you should be doing samples of the colors you're planning to use prior to starting, like a sample of your project. I mean, I think if you're making a large painting that you're planning on exhibiting and selling, doing a smaller version to test out your colors would be a great idea anyway. You know, it's the same sort of thing, like in every aspect of life. You know, the hamburger you get at McDonald's isn't the first time they've ever made that hamburger. Even when they release something new, they test it out a bunch of times before they do it, right? A ballet dancer doesn't just like sit, you know, like the screen, you know, the curtain's about to go up and it's like, I just showed up, I have no idea what's going on. Let's just, okay, I'm just going to read, okay, I'm supposed to do a couple pirouettes. Okay, sure thing, let's figure it out live for the first time, right? An author, you know, has an editor that helps them and so on and so forth, right? So maybe practicing, seeing what color combinations are going to work, yes, would be a very smart idea. Again, Jean says, if you say warm blue, how am I supposed to understand that you speak of purplish blue and not green blue? Why green blue should be cool? It makes no sense. I understand, Jean, that it doesn't make any sense. But as I said, I did like a 3-hour episode answering every question you have, right? So rather than me making another 3-hour video right now answering every question you have, it'd be a lot easier just to watch that video, right? Pascal's doing some great work answering. Lori says, I think it would be interesting to see what color first layer colors would do to the other colors on top. And we did do a little bit of that again on the color temperature painting, right? I've done this many times before, but again, I guess not everyone bothers to watch those episodes. So here, for instance, let me see. Let's look at so this one I painted on a white background. There was no Imprimatura, just painted directly colors onto the white. Right here, just to show people, I painted a magenta Imprimatura, so a reddish color to start. And here I painted the warm yellow that I typically use. And then I did the paintings exactly the same. So this side of the painting this is just white with these same colors. This has got yellow underneath, and this has got red, cool red underneath. They all make slightly different changes. I also, when I did the Hilma af Klimt painting, so if you like abstract paintings, a year and a half ago I did 2 episodes on Hilma af Klimt, and I did exactly that. I broke, I think there was 2 paintings I did. I think I split them into 4, and I did 4 different colors in each space, and then painted over top of it, even though that's not what she did. But I did that just so I could show people exactly what you guys are talking about. Tanya says, roll them R's, baby. Imprimatura. I just don't understand these questions, Jean. To defend this, you have to get out a precise color wheel and point to the warm extreme. If yellow is cooler than red, you have to demonstrate it. For the moment, it is all so confusing. Well, what... I think, you know, what we're doing is we're way overcomplicating things. If you use the palette that I use, it makes things so much easier. Like, paint... If you haven't watched those first few episodes, then I can understand why things are so much more complicated. But it's almost like walking into the last day of medical school and sitting down and saying, "How come I don't understand anything? This is so complicated." Well, I mean, we did cover all of those things before, so I don't know what to tell you. So it is, if you haven't watched any of those episodes where I go deep in depth on all of those concepts, then I think me trying to do a quick review of all of them is just going to make things more complex and more confusing than if you just watch those previous episodes, where it's all explained nice and slowly and quietly with graphics and images. Okay, so I'm going to put this green in here. Do I like this green? Maybe I want to do a bit more of this green here, just a bit more. Same sort of thing. I'll maybe put a little bit more green. Not everywhere, because I want a little bit of variation and variety in there. A little bit more green in here. Okay, and I want a little red dot over here. Or is that an orange dot? It looks almost a little bit more orangey. And then a yellow in here. Oh, you know what? Well, before I get the red off my brush, I want to do the red line here. Now, this is the first time I've used a smaller brush, by the way. I'm going to use this. I'm just going to use my warm red. And you said there was a bit of yellow in there. It's okay. I'm going to take this and go around. You could, maybe if I zoom in, you can see that it kind of almost looks a little bit more brownish, because I'm painting this red on top of the blue, and that blue is really dark, and it's pulling the red across into the center of the color wheel. In fact, I'm going to take a bit more of this red. I'm just going to paint around some of the edges. Maybe even take a bit of this red and a little bit of my dark color. Let's get a different, darker red, right? So again, that was my darkest color. A little bit darker than I was planning. It's okay, but not quite the level of subtlety that he had. And then the next thing I want to do is, remember there was those purples that I mixed earlier and I said I was going to come back to? So we'll do that. And also there's this yellow in here. I'm just going to take some of my cool yellow, because I haven't really got any cool yellow on its own. I'll put the cool yellow right here. Let's put a little bit more cool yellow over top of this warm yellow. They are slightly different colors. One is warm and one's cool, so it's just going to be maybe a little bit more saturated and bright and poppy there. It's barely going to be noticeable, but put it there anyway. Let's do... oh, you know what? There was this same darker red that I had here. I want to put a bit of it on this edge right here. Oh, and yeah, let's do the purple. I'll put a little more red there. Actually, we could put a bit of this right there. Just trying to see if I've got... kind of fun just to give those little bits of nuance where we're just sort of darkening little bits here and there, which kind of simulates a little bit of that look of watercolor when it sits and dries and kind of gets a little bit darker, you know, where the pigment pools a little bit. And this is often where I get derailed because I just love doing this kind of stuff late in a painting. Okay, so this time I will paint my purple again. So I'm going to take my warm blue and my cool red. Let's mix these together. We get a nice dark purple. Is that going to be too dark? Let's get a bit more of the cool red, my magenta in here. And then actually maybe just a tiny bit of white, not too much. Oh, it's so nice and lush. Same thing here. Actually, that I think I want to be... Let's get a bit more red in here. A tiny bit more white. Just lighten it up a little bit. I thought there was another bit of purple. Oh, right up top there. Yes, same sort of thing. Okay. Oh, and I was going to do a bit down here. I think I'm going to just use a bit of a smaller brush as we're getting close to wrapping up. Oh, there's a bit of red right up here. So I was thinking also just doing a tiny bit of the magenta in a few places. So I got this warm red that needs to go up here. So I'm going to take my magenta. And it probably is not going to come across very well on camera. But again, having that little bit of a different red, I think, is really important. Okay. I'm sure the minute I finish, I'll see a major glaring error that I totally forgot. I guess there was... Let's take this magenta. When that dries, it'll do a little something different. And some magenta in here. Oh, and that blue. How did I miss the blue right in the middle this whole time? That's funny. So let's take... I'm just going to take the last little bits of blue that remain on here. I'm going to need a bit more white in there. Okay. So, yeah, Tanya says we can't explain our color theory in a chat. Again, I did many videos talking about this, so it's just, yeah, you're gonna have to do a little. I'm not gonna go do it all again right now for you, but it's all of this makes sense. It's been proven, and I know you say this is my theory. this is one of the foundations of not just Western art, Eastern art, all art. This is the foundation of everything that we know. Like the way that your television works, your computer works, the printing process. If you've got a book in your house with colored pictures, if you've got a driver's license with a color, I mean, it's a fact. I don't know how to explain it to people, but it's you can try to come up with your own way of understanding color, and there's certainly other people who have tried throughout history. But good luck. Okay, so I'm going to put my name on here. Is it the 8th, right? Squares with concentric. You know, it probably wouldn't have surprised me if there were more of these types of things that he did. Like maybe there's one with squares with concentric triangles, circles with concentric squares, or some, you know, all sorts of stuff like that. And maybe they're well known, or maybe they're lost. Maybe he threw them out in the garbage and somebody just found this in the garbage, pulled it out, and put it on eBay, or I don't, you know, it's, who knows. So this was intended to be a very simple painting. The chat and some of the conversation around here made it maybe more complicated than it actually is. Again, I think if you just follow and listen along to the colors as I was mixing them, it's pretty straightforward. I can understand why some people find it pretty complex, but remember, if you're using this simple split primary palette where we've only got 6 colors plus white, it really does simplify things, right? Because then if I say we're going to make a warm orange, then you're just warm red and warm yellow. If you want to make a warm brown, it's warm yellow and warm red and warm blue. Right? All those things simplify things. Then it's because, you know, I understand there's a lot of, you know, I'm in the minority. Most other people who teach painting are going to tell you, go buy these 12 colors, you know, a Prussian blue, a cadmium red light, a cadmium red medium, a cadmium and burnt umber, and blah blah blah. And then you're at the art supply store, you've got this super complicated list, and then they say, well, okay, that palette works well for portraits. You're like, okay, but I also want to do landscapes. Okay, no, that's a whole other set of colors. You got to go buy another 12 totally different colors. Well, 2 of them will work, but all the rest of those colors you can't use for landscape. You're like, oh my goodness, I just spent $300 on all these tubes. Okay, so I got to spend it. Okay. Here we can do, and we've done, this is painting number 186 that I've done using the system. We've painted the Mona Lisa. We've painted the most famous Picasso, the most famous Van Goghs. We've painted the most famous Tom Thompson and Group of 7 paintings. And we're going to be painting more of them. Right? So I don't know what to tell anybody who doubts how this works, because we've proven that it works. And not just me, again. This is a system that people have been using for a long time, but it's just not popularized, right? So part of what I'm trying to do is I want to make sure that beginner painters, people who've never painted before, trying to take the confusion right out of it, right? If you follow me step by step, it gets easier and easier and easier. Yes, of course, like anything, the first time you do it, it's right over your head. That's why I go back and watch those first 5 videos and how I talk about what kinds of brushes, what kinds of paint, and specifically what kinds of paint for every different paint company. You don't have to use the brands I'm using. I'm not sponsored or paid by anybody, right? But if you follow those things, you can get these exact results, and they're not too far off of what the original was, right? Yeah, maybe a few different colors in here. If we go in here, we can start noticing lots of differences, right? But the point is not to make an exact reproduction. It's just to understand how mixing colors work, right? How we can get roughly a brown, how we can get a green, how we can get purples, and how we can modify them all. Okay. So, if you enjoyed today's episode, please consider helping the show out by doing some of these free activities, such as just liking, hitting subscribe, the notification bell, letting your friends know about these episodes. If you take a picture of this and you put it up on your Facebook, you can link back to this YouTube video so that people can find the exact same information that you used to make today's painting. If, however, you also want to leave a small donation, you feel that this was helpful and a good learning experience, there are some links, the PayPal and etc., my website, they're all down below. So if you want to use any of these ways to contribute to the show, this is how it works. Okay, everyone. Thank you so much for watching, for painting with me. If you're really interested in this particular artist and you want to do more paintings by Wassily Kandinsky, join me in a couple of days. We're going to be doing something. The painting itself, compositionally, is much more complex. But again, we're using this exact same palette. Nothing changes. And it's intended to be for more advanced artists. But if you're a beginner, you may want to watch it on Tuesdays. We do easy paintings. Next week, on next Tuesday, we're going to do a Sonia Delaunay painting. Very simple, straightforward painting. And then on Thursday of next week, we're going to do a more complex painting by Sonia Delaunay. Okay, everybody? Enjoy the rest of your afternoon or your weekend or wherever you might happen to be. And we will see you guys on Thursday. Good night, everybody. Talk to you again soon.